And these are some of the protections that are offered. You have protection from default judgments, stay of proceedings, 6% interest cap on, and lease terminations. I'm going to go through these individually. Who gets the protections? Protections are mainly in place for reserve service members. They do apply to active duty service members, but not in the same, up to the same extent as they do to reserve service members. And I know when on active duty and Title 10 status probably means nothing to you, but what that means is that's when there's been a presidential call-up of the reserves or National Guard, and these National Guardsmen or reservists have been placed on full-time active duty, and they've obviously left their jobs, and they might be staying in the area or they might be deploying overseas. It also applies when the National Guard is called to federal service. I just mentioned that. But also, Washington State provides its own protections for service members that are called at by the governor to respond to various things such as fires or riots. And these are some of the things that the SCRA protections, were provided during the Washington National Guard's deployment to Katrina, the airport security right after 9/11. And when do the protections begin? They begin when either the person enters active duty, or for the reserve components in National Guard, when that person has received their order saying, hey, you're going to go on active duty on this date. So when that reservist or National Guard member receive those orders, that's the time when he can or she can, start giving notice to their employer, or start giving notice to, let's say, their landlord, saying, hey, I'm going to have to break this lease, I'm going to be overseas, so I will obviously not need housing, and paying rent would be detrimental to the financial situation. Normally they end when the service is completed. There are certain exceptions for court proceedings. Those are 90 days after release from active duty. So when the person returns from their deployment, or when their mobilization ends and they're released from active duty, that's when that 90-day clock begins. And this is going to be covered in another briefing, as are many of these subjects, but I just want to, probably can't get enough information on this, so I'm going to keep going with it. But a stay of proceedings, that's very important. Obviously someone who's not going to be in the country or is going to be in another state while they have a court matter pending, proceeding pending, this protection will allow them to stay that proceeding, so they don't have to worry about that until they return from wherever it is that they were sent to, or when they get off active duty. It does not apply to criminal proceedings. So if someone has a court date in a criminal court somewhere, say a DUI, whatever it may be, that service member is expected to attend all his court dates as required by the court. I mean, the service member can talk to the court, maybe get an extension, but the SCRA does not provide protection for criminal matters. There's also another component that the service member is, actually, can I get the questions toward the end? The requirement is that the service member is unavailable and that there's a material effect on their ability to attend the court proceeding, or if attending the court proceeding would adversely affect them either in their military status or otherwise. And again, this is actually, material effect is a recurring concept throughout much of the SCRA, and it doesn't have to be a detrimental, it doesn't have to be strictly financial, that the person is going to lose money or be in a worse financial state. It could be, material effect could be that the person is, let's say, they're ordered active duty and they're going to be stationed or deployed somewhere far away from their home. That is a material effect. Stay requests is very important to follow certain steps. As everyone here who's a practicing attorney knows, there's certain court rules and procedures that must be followed, otherwise that might impact negatively on their case. And here's some of the requirements for asking for a stay from the court. Default judgments, that's going to be covered in further, but it applies only when the service member has not appeared. Otherwise, if they had appeared in the court proceeding, they'd be seeking a stay, and that's also covered by the Act. But basically, that if there's a party seeking a default judgment against a service member because that person has not deployed, they have to actually give an affidavit to the court stating that that person is not in military service for that default judgment to be awarded. If the person is in military service, then that service member is protected from a default judgment. And again, here's the process for reopening default judgments in case that wasn't caught on the front end. The service member gets back and finds out that there's a proceeding against him or her and a default judgment was entered. There's certain steps that they can get that default judgment reopened. Statute of limitations that tolls while a service member is on active duty.